Hello and welcome. This is Working Class to World Class. But before we go any further, I do have a little favour of you. If you could hit that follow or subscribe button, then that would be a massive help. Thank you. In this episode, we go stateside where I chat with a lady from Baltimore who tells me of how her struggles in life helped her become one of the most successful CEOs in advertising. Breaking through the barriers of adversity. I'm Lynn Lester, and this is Working Class to World Class. So, Beth Ann, thank you so much for joining me all the way from, is it the States? Are you in New York today?
I am. I think maybe, I know not others can see the background, but you can. It's New York City.
It is absolutely gorgeous. It looks bright but maybe cold, and I'm obviously in Glasgow, so we'll Clydebank. So it's been bucketing it down today, but hopefully, it will perk up. But there you go. I'm a typical Brit talking about the weather.
We do that a lot here as well.
Oh, do you know it's inherent in our DNA? So yeah, I just wanted to sort of kick this off because a lot of people won't know who you are. I mean, obviously I'm very privileged to work in the marketing media scene. So I know who you are. I know how famous you are in the industry. But for people tuning in, can you just explain who is Beth Ann?
Who is Beth Ann? That's a big, deep question. Well, I'll start with the present day. Right now I'm the CEO of our global commerce practice at VMLY&R. And I also am the CEO of our New York group, and I'm, heavily involved in many of our large clients. So
Wow.
that's in an industry, an agency industry landscape. VMLY&R is a big part of WPP. And most of my career has been on both the agency and client side in the marketing communication space.
Okay, so for anyone who doesn't know to interpret that, that's a really big deal. It's a very big role, and particularly for a woman in the industry. Obviously, you're a powerhouse of a woman, and we're going to dig into that in a bit more detail. But you weren't always this successful person who was running a business, had lots and lots and lots of staff who you were looking after. So let's just sort of take you back down to memory lane and just really interrogate for a while. How did you manage to become who you are today? So yeah, where were you brought up?
Well, I was born and raised in Baltimore, Maryland. That is where my dad's side of the family had made its way into the United States. And my mom's side of the family was from Massachusetts. So we kept lots of ties and lots of time spent in Massachusetts as well. So I feel a little bit like equal parts Bostonian, although very different places to be raised. But, you can't take the girl out of Baltimore, a lot of my friends still say to me. So if you're more local to the States or to what that means, you kind of understand it a bit.
Yeah, okay. No, I don't quite get it, but I'm sure if I lived there, I would understand. And so when you were brought up, obviously you were brought up there, but what was your family makeup? Do you have siblings? What did your parents do? That kind of thing.
Yeah, so I have one sister. My parents have very different backgrounds. My mom actually was in politics in her early days, but left professionalism or working, professional jobs when she had children. My dad is a lawyer and ended up having a very kind of successful start to his career. But my parents got divorced when I was very young. I was about 5 years old. And it was in the 70s during a time when not as common as today. We hear about divorces and people come from split families or mixed families. And at the time, it just wasn't something that I had a frame of reference to, that my mother had friends or anybody else going through. So it was truly a time of like separating out and breaking up the family. And I think that obviously had a disproportionate role in my childhood experience. Just being so young. I have a younger sister, so she was even younger at the time. And then my dad went on over time to have a second family. So we do have half brothers in our life too. And I know at some point we'll get into some of those dynamics, but it was tough. It was, we had a kind of very split life with like almost as if you were seeing kind of a split screen of how things were playing out. And it was a very different experience for my mom, who was really struggling emotionally and financially as a single mom, raising two girls in a very unexpected scenario to what she was expecting in her life in a city that wasn't her city, where she had no family and few friends. So it was an interesting moment in time we found ourselves in.
Well, I mean, that must be really tough. Some guests I've had, we talk about either coming from nothing and then you build your way up, but it must almost be tougher having something like, living that. I guess lawyers at that in that day and age got paid probably quite well. And then to go from that to then being with your mom and, as you say, she was struggling. Like, how did you find that switch?
I think I was too young to experience what was so stable before, and any element of what was the, sort of privilege and benefits of kind of my dad's maybe early success. It was, and everything was playing out more on an almost emotional level than it was in terms of, we still had at the time, our house and some core elements that kept things, feeling like we weren't in harm's way, I guess is the best way to put it. But the emotional stress and anxiety that we were watching play out with my mom, just the feeling of abandonment that we were feeling at that time. And then over years, as my dad continued to prosper, we didn't see him that frequently. We saw him occasionally on Sundays. Fortunately, part of that ritual was about seeing my grandparents too, which we'll
Mm.
touch upon as well, because that was a real stabilizing force for us. But my dad's success kind of played out as like someone that you kind of knew of, and was starting to like build and live a very separate life, and that was very disconnected from the pain and challenge and probably exaggerated hardship that I think we were feeling, my sister and I with my mom, and sort of the three of us against the world oftentimes was a bit of the feeling at home.
Yeah, I mean, it's really a difficult situation because I think unless you're in it, you can never fully understand it and how that must feel to feel, yeah, as you say, you're abandoned. But you were obviously quite young at the time, and but of course you grew up as a young adult and with your mom. So what was that dynamic like when your mom was sort of having tougher days? Like, how did you and your sister deal with that?
I think the one thing that we always try to do is use humor, to just redirect the pain a little bit and find a way to just laugh at either an absurdity or how, ridiculous the situation had become with all of us, and try to pull my mom out of it, because when she's filled with laughter, she's a completely different person. And so, and the same with the home. But it was hard because the very quick emotional shifts that can take place for anyone that's kind of been through a trauma or a really painful situation that is elongated, that lasts like almost chronic. It lasts for a long time. It's not acute. It doesn't take, doesn't
Yeah.
all of a sudden get nurtured and take care of itself. So, and the triggers for it too just keep coming back up again. It was hard. And I think that that's also why my sister and I, and we continue to be to this day, very, very close. We kind of almost have our own secret hidden language, and even just eye contact and body language. We just know what we're both thinking. But I think we double teamed. We have very different personalities, and so we dealt with it differently too. We played different roles. And I think though the other part was, being, and I say this to people that I work with, empathy obviously is a term we use a lot in the marketing space, but I think I have like a heightened empathetic sense about things. I usually am always kind of on an emotional plane with people, and maybe to a fault sometimes sort of over index on trying to sense what people are feeling and play a role
Yeah.
within sort of the emotional context of things.
Yeah, do I actually think, we talk about superpowers. I talk about this a lot in the chats I have, but I actually think it's an inner strength that, even if you're a leader, and, I think the trait of a really good leader is to really sense others and how they feel. And so I know what you're saying. Sometimes you can get maybe too emotionally involved, but I do think it's a wonderful trait in a human, as opposed to being sort of like power crazy. And see for your, growing up with your mom, obviously your dad's saying having this new life, new family, and I kind of get the sense that you kind of seen him now and then, but it was it was quite a separate thing. Like, did you ever get like going on holiday or anything? Could your mum afford to do that, or what was your sort of summers like?
So, in terms of holidays, it was funny. My mom was so determined to, one, try to make everything as normal as possible. And we were still living, like I said, a little bit with, there was some affluence around us that we were seeing, which in some ways makes it even harder. It would be sometimes it's different if you've never seen and you're just living the life that you have, that there's no point of comparison.
Yeah.
So she was always striving to have us feel like we were not getting. And especially around what would develop us as humans and develop our sense of experience and perspective in the world. So we would always keep quiet from friends how we would get somewhere, but we would get there. So, for instance, a lot of friends at the time would go down to like Miami, Florida for vacations or Disney World. And so we would take the bus, I mean, literally the Greyhound bus, or, an Amtrak train and spend hours and hours, or we just get in our old, 15-year-old Volvo station wagon and make the trek with our AAA map and find the motor inn and the motel. And again, we would like not disclose to our friends. It would be we'd go along with the fact that there was a flight that took us there and that we were staying at the hotel that was attached to Disney World. But we were very fortunate because the most important thing that we knew is that we were still having those experiences, and that my mom was absolutely fighting for and working multiple jobs to get us give us the ability to. I can tell you one very quick side story. My mom was a smoker growing up, which of course was also common at the time, and we would try desperately to get her to stop. And so at one point we did this thing where we had a jar that the money that would have gone to get a pack of, or not a pack, but I forget, I guess a case of cigarettes would go into this jar, and then that money would be spent on like a Broadway show that we would either take a train to New York, or we would see in our local theater, like Annie, for instance, or Cats was some of the ones that were on our top list that we got to see from the money my mom saved when she was able not to buy cigarettes.
Wow. Oh
So
God,
it was like filled with that. It was really trying to um, give us the joys in life to counter the things that we all knew were struggles and were pains that we were going through.
do you know the lovely thing about that as well is that I guess your mum taught you a lot of creativity, so you can get what you want, but you just have to be creative about how you go about it. So you might have to drive, you might not get the first class or even economy on a flight, but you can drive all these hours, stay in the motel, not the flashy one, but it didn't matter because you still got the end result. And I actually think, in life in general, it's not really about, they talk about it's not about how you get there, it's just about getting there, your final destination, and I guess enjoying it as you go. And did your friends ever like cotton on? So obviously you were saying like, you would fabricate how you done it and you would I guess you would sort of creative in your mind. But did any of your friends ever see through that, or did they just believe that's what you did?
That's a little bit of a tough question to answer because one, I've had different friendships over the years, so I
Yeah.
haven't gone back and really had these kind of conversations with friends during that time period. I would say that some of them, the closest ones to me at the time, probably did a bit or questioned to their parents and would probably say something and ask and question. I think that the, you know, I think that the people who really genuinely were there as friends were accepting, and like it was about the quality of the relationship. And I think they understood that they could see, obviously, that my life, my upbringing, where I lived, everything was different from theirs. But I also did have a lot of kind of the mean girl experiences and challenges that come with being in high school and having people, or junior high school and lower school, where it is tough sometimes with your peer group. And so I also did go through a fair amount of being bullied, and I'm not sure whether that those things played a role in that or not. It's just hard to say.
Yeah, it's really difficult. I mean, I was bullied as a kid, actually from the age of 6 years old up until
Yeah.
about 12 years old. So for about
Right.
6 years of my childhood,
Yeah.
I was tortured effectively. And I actually just recently, and I think it's maybe by doing this podcast, I actually told a couple of my sisters about this, and they were affronted. They were like, "Oh my God, why did you never say?" And but at the time for me, I was mortally embarrassed. I couldn't believe, I just felt as if I was letting my family down, although it was no fault of mine. But through the lens of a child, I was
Hmm.
really angry, emotionally upset. But then something in me just made me continue to be strong. Is that kind of how you felt? Like, how did you deal with it?
Well, I mentioned my grandparents earlier. I'll bring them back into the conversation right now because they were just, huge influences in my life, and they didn't get involved. They never took sides. Although there was a rift between my grandmother and my mother for many years. So it were on my father's side, and but they were very respectful individuals. My grandfather they were both in the educational space and administrators and very respected educators in Baltimore. My grandfather was in the a kind of camp of unconditional love, and my grandmother was more in the camp of hard knock love, to like build
Yeah.
character and to build discipline and sense of self. So the combination was really powerful in my life, and I'm so fortunate that we had them. Especially because like not ever in my life did I sleep over my father's house, which is sort of hard to get your head around, or go on a vacation or a holiday with him and his family. But we did have that with my grandparents. So they were huge influences. And my grandmother, if I would share with her things like this that I was going through, she was always very strong and articulate in how she would kind of help guide me through these things. And she would say things like, that's on them, not on you. Don't take it on. And it was even like a language that we use today, like around setting boundaries and just seeing things for the long game, not like allowing the pain to, you're allowed to feel the pain, but don't stay trapped in it. Then move on
Yeah.
because it's speaks to them and speaks to who they are. And she used to say all the time, even physically, she used to say it's so much more important to be beautiful on the inside than it is to be beautiful on the outside. And so, just some of her wisdom, I think, I was seeking at that time, and so it really helped to hear it from her, and then to get that on the balance with my grandpa, that sense of unconditional love. And it really, I will say that no matter how painful things got and how isolated we might have been at home when we were not with them, just knowing that they were in this world and how they felt about us. And I wish this for every human being. It's like you just cannot underestimate how that one person's love and acceptance in your life can be so powerful and help you overcome almost anything.
Well, that's a really lovely story. I mean, your grandparents sound amazing, actually. And for you to have that conversation, I imagine probably quite a young age, and for them to sort of deal with it in such a sensitive manner, it's just great. I mean, I think had I told my mum, she probably would have got herself into trouble. So I could never tell her just to preserve her. I didn't want her to be put in prison. So, but honestly, my mother was like, I describe her as the heart of Mother Teresa, but the wrath of William Wallace, freedom or no freedom type thing, just, a force to be reckoned with. And so, you talk
Mom was
about,
tough too, by the way. She was
oh,
very,
really?
very, very tough. And she still is to some degree today. I mean, you wouldn't know it if you know her and see her, but she can be very tough.
Yeah, in what way do you mean, like in terms of like pick yourself up sort of way, or dealing with confrontation, or, yeah,
Expectations is a big one. She's a perfectionist herself. So there's always not good enough. Perfectionism is like usually her first response to things is how can it be better? And just have very, very high expectations of us and wanting to not see us fall short of what could be possible if we didn't let the other things that we were dealt get in the way of our futures.
yeah. Do you know, I think it is a generational thing as well, isn't it? It's not about a pity party. All these bad things can happen, but actually it's how you deal with it. And it's
Mhm.
easier said than done. We can say these things, but when you're going through that emotional turmoil, it's not quite so easy. But definitely wise words. I'm sure, we'll talk about this in a second. I'm sure this is what's driven you in your career, in your life in general, from, not only your grandparents, but obviously the words of your mum. And so, talk to me about your schooling then. So you went to school. You've mentioned you were bullied, of course, having to deal with all that. But what were you typically like as a student? Were you quite good at school?
I was definitely hard. I was very similar to how I am today, actually. There hasn't been much evolution or change. It was like,
Yeah.
what, I figured out what worked for me and I just kept doing it. I worked really hard in school and I threw myself into school. In fact, that was sort of a safe haven for me in many ways. So no matter like what was happening the evening before or the tension at home, sort of pull myself out and go into the school and the school work, because I mentioned sometimes the relational part of that, the friendship part wasn't always, that wasn't always the fun part for me. It ended up being like the teachers, the learning, the thing that gave me hope, that and a feedback, like a positive feedback mechanism, that like just even through the process of grading, that maybe I was okay, that
Yeah.
maybe there was a chance in the future, and I didn't know what that meant or what that held, but I just sort of felt like it was my way out. It was my way into something better, and it always felt better for me, like just being so deeply engaged in something and finding the things that I might be interested in or passionate about or good at, just always perpetuated for me something that felt
Yeah.
like progress and that was going to lead me to something different and better. And like a very important thing that I both had put on me, but also sort of discovered earlier on, was this idea of like count on nobody but yourself. And, that self-reliance that I developed really, really early. And so I think school was another furthering of that, that it equipped in me with with skill and, abilities that would give me further self-reliance for the future.
Do you know, I think all these things are set to test us, but you're right. I mean, even from a young age, you're sort of then starting to sort of, I guess, it's a sense of survival, isn't it? And you have to rely on you because, it's hard, isn't it, relying on other people? Because if they let you down, where does that leave you? But I guess as you get older, you start building that trust, obviously, with partners and children and whatever it might be. And so for you then, like you were talking about, you sort of clung on to the things you were good at, and I guess that gave you a sense of belonging. So what were you good at?
What was I good at? Well, I did get exposed to dance very early on. As I mentioned, my mom really was very focused on like what are the things that we can expose the girls to that will help them discover that there's talent there, and there's purpose, and then there's something that is the escape from the sadness and the sense that there is an absence of something else, that
Yeah,
there was this gap and hole and void in our life. And so for me early on, there was definitely the, dance component from a more of a classical training standpoint. We went to a place called Peabody, that some people who are familiar with either dance or Baltimore will know, at Peabody Conservatory, both music and dance. And for me, it was it extended my day. So we worked latchkey kids again. Before there was such a
yeah.
thing as latchkey kids. So we would go home to an empty house because my mom was working, many, many, shifts and jobs to try to continue to provide. And it gave me that extended time and another outlet for both, also a huge amount of physical energy for people who know me, also something that really hasn't changed. But I had this very, which was good. It's a motivating force, but I've had this always huge amount of physical energy, and it gave me a chance to put it into a direction again of something that was going to be positive for myself, and at the same time teach me a certain sense of like the benefit of what comes from routine and ritual and practice and dedication to something that then you become good at, and that you maybe also separates you out from other people around you and helps you get noticed as being uniquely you.
Wow, so you're a dancer, are you still good?
Am I still good? Is that what you
Yeah, yeah, are you still good at dancing?
know? I mean, I've parlayed it into like it was aerobics, and then I'm a runner. I've been a runner since my
Right.
20s, like decades now of running under my belt. So I've found like the parallel universe of what is that same amount of time and commitment every single day to that physicality. But and I'm still like I do yoga, so I still have elements of that left. But no, I would say
Oh,
I would not be good.
yeah, do you know when it comes to running, I really want to be a runner. Like, but I'm not very good, but B, I just think it's an excuse 'cause I don't really like it. So I just get bored. I'm bored easily. So I've got a little attention span, and then that's me. But I guess I can see how it could be cathartic running, and you sort of, I guess you get into your own bubble, don't you? I mean, I have done a little bit, but like like
Call
amateur
it
level.
meditation in motion. And I also, audiobooks have changed it for me. Like I loved listening to music when I run. And I still give myself those days, but I listen to audiobooks when I run now too. So it's a huge multitasker. So it's like meditation in motion. I'm listening to books that I want to get through and I'm running at the same time. So it's the boredom doesn't necessarily set in.
Yeah, well, that's a skill actually, multitasking on a very different level. So well done. You need to teach me how to do all of that. And so then, for you, obviously you're at school, so you've kind of get into stuff that you really like, and that's great. I guess your mom at that point was helping to give you vision, and as you were saying, you were getting into things to sort of see your future. So then, how did things develop from there that sort of maybe led you into the sort of working life?
Well, I started working pretty young, actually, with a little bit of a fib, I would say, more of a very white fib, if that's an idea, not a white lie, that I had to get into the Gap before I'd actually turned 16. But it was because I was wanted it for my summer job, and I didn't turn in 16 until August, so it was kind of
Right.
like just stretching the time period a little bit, and my manager was all in on that because they were like desperate for help. So that was my first paying job was when I was 15 years old, and kind of been working ever since, to be completely honest. But also, again, another thing that's always given me a sense of purpose, and I've enjoyed the act of work, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Like even in the house, one of the things my mom was also very strict about was the cleanliness of the house, and my sister and I were the ones that were responsible for the full house cleaning and cleaning of the house, and she was very particular about how that was going to come out as well. So like, but even the physical act of working for me has always been a sense of cathartic, purposeful, motion as well, and something that is that I gravitate to, especially in times of anxiety, not away from. So feeling productive and then being in like when it's external jobs like it was for my first job at the Gap, like learning how to build relationships and be out there in the public with people has was also a huge turning point for me.
Yeah, because you're kind of making your own way, aren't you? So what was it? Was it in the service industry, this first job?
It was the Gap. I don't know if you're familiar with
Oh,
the apparel chain. It was again
oh, the gap,
recently
right?
had
I
become,
understand, understand.
yeah, no one thinks of it anymore. But at the time, it had just like become like the chain of the moment, and so it was
Got you.
kind of in my mind when I was going after the role. I thought, I saw it, had seen it was advertised looking for people in the summer to help, and it was several miles from my house, but I had just gotten a bike for my birthday from my grandparents. And it was kind of crazy when I think about it now because it was, again, before roads were set up for bikes. I had like me and my little bell helmet and my Schwinn blue bike, probably going 10 miles to this place so I could work there for the summer and make a salary. That was my entryway into the workforce.
Do you know, I think it's funny when you start working even like young. I remember working in a retail store as well when I think I must have been it was about 19. It was just when my mum had just died and stuff, and it wasn't long after that. When you get the taste of money, even although it's not loads, right? So it was like minimum wage. But when you just get the sense of earning, and as you say, you're not relying on anybody, you start having your own autonomy. It's actually quite difficult then to dip back into, say, education or something, because you're like, you don't want to ever lose the dollar or the pound. Is that how you felt?
I did feel that way a little bit. I mean, I think there was no question in my mind that I was going to go to college or, obviously finish high school.
Yeah.
But yes, I think I felt like at the time it was like, having like stacks of bills even, in my like jewelry box.
Yeah.
Like you definitely felt again, go back to the idea of self-sustainable and self-reliant. It was empowering for sure to see what it meant to start saving and to know that you were building your own little tiny cushion as much as it might be just that.
Yeah, exactly. Well, you can maybe go out for a weekend or do whatever. And so when you obviously decided to go to college, as you were saying, you had no doubt. So what in your mind, what were you wanting to go and do, or did you have a longer term vision, or were you kind of not at that stage yet?
I think I kind of started early on knowing that I was gravitating towards the area of communications. I did have
Okay.
between some of my mom's work and my father's wife, she was in a line of communications as well in her job and profession. And just in terms of, feedback and orientation in school, even in terms of being loving writing, there was things that I felt confident that that could be a pathway for me without actually knowing the job or having, a true sense of how that was going to play out. And when I was looking into colleges, the first thing was I had a boyfriend that was a year ahead of me, and he went to Duke, and so my first thought was that's where I'll go. And then there was a moment where I kind of also determined for myself, is that really how I want to make my choice of college? Do I am I going to really define my next 4 years based on following, someone to where they wanted to go? And so that was where it really helped inform when I finally had that personal conversation with myself. It helped me say, okay, where else might be my actual pick, and where do I think I could maybe um, have an experience that was going to be really more uniquely me.
Yeah, I mean, it's quite a mature way to think, isn't it? Because I mean, even when I think back at school, I never knew like the marketing industry existed. Didn't even know what it meant. So that was never really a thing that we were taught. You grew up to work in a shop or a receptionist, and by the way, there's nothing wrong with those jobs. Someone has to do it to fulfill society and to keep the
Yeah.
world going. But for me, that's what I thought was kind of like if you were a receptionist, that was like a really successful job. It was never I didn't understand the differences. So, I mean, maybe it was just a bit more advanced, maybe where
Mhm.
you're from. I suppose I'm from a very small town. So it's the mentality and the thinking is very, very different. So when you've obviously went to college and, you mentioned writing a minute ago and you were sort of then tapping up the things that you were relatively quite good at. So did you then how talk me through like when did you leave and then sort of get your first like big job or how what was the transition period?
The transition period was my mom had finally moved back to Boston. And I think she was sort of hanging into Baltimore, both for some consistency and, a sacrifice for my sister and I and to keep us close to our grandparents. But she had always really missed having the tie to home for her. And so she had moved back there. So when I was coming to Boston for the summers from school, I was in the same kind of facing, what do I do for the summer? And I was not one of, again, with the strictness there, was not one of those kids that had the ability to just like get a summer home with a bunch of friends by the beach and waitress or, get that kind of, summer experience that I think a lot of people should and do try to strive for. It was more, what are you doing to prepare yourself for your future? And so it was very funny because she said, "Well, you've declared yourself, an advertising major at school. Start looking and this was phone book era. Start looking for advertising agencies under A." And I was like, "Well, what do you mean?" She's like, "Literally just start calling them." So this was like go through the phone book, and I got to at the time, which was one of the best advertising agencies in Boston, started with a C. So I'd gone down the list with C, and I was very lucky. To your point, the person who was at the reception desk was looking to get out into an account coordinator position, and so when I called for a summer job, she just took the first call. She took it. She didn't put it to someone else. She said, "That's funny. We just got a reception job open this morning for the summertime. If you'd like to come in and meet with me, I will interview you." So it was complete serendipity. I, put on my best version of like, a professional outfit, went down to Boston Back Bay, which is where it was at the time, and met with the receptionist to take her job so that she could get into the job that she
Wow.
wanted. And so I met her and she had me meet the actual boss that was the name on the door of the agency at the time. And so I started through that receptionist job as an intern. And then through that, really started, navigating my way through networking and meeting people in the city, making an impact, asking for work while I was at the receptionist desk all summer long. I was asking to write copy, edit things. The nice thing about the agency was it was part PR on one side of the business and part advertising. So I really was able to get exposure to both sides and start to actually do a little bit of support work in both functions.
Wow, talk about being in the right place at the right time. Old-fashioned telephone.
Luck.
I know. Well, do you know what? I do believe in karma. Like I've been saying this a lot the last few weeks. There's definitely just something. There must be some alignment of the stars. And so when you did that, did you then go back to college after the summer?
Oh yeah. I completed my college studies, but I kept in touch with them. Like I would even go, we had almost like a 3.5 week vacation during the holidays. And same thing there. Everybody wanted to take vacations. And so since they knew me, it was the same kind of like I'm filling their needs. So I would come
Yeah.
in willingly and work up my 3 week vacation, and they would be able to take holidays, and they would rotate through my time there. So I stayed very close and in touch with that agency. And it was my first job out of school. What I did when I graduated college was, and this was an incredible gift my grandparents gave me, but they knew I'd wanted to go study abroad, which wasn't going to happen because I was trying to complete a dual major. So what I did do though, with their help, was I went backpacking in Europe when I graduated. One of those things that you can also do with a fairly, at the time, cheap open-ended airline ticket, 3 months, your real hostels, the Let's Go Europe
Yeah.
book, and see as much of your area of the woods, the UK, Scotland, Ireland, and then into Europe. So I did that for 3 months, but I had secured that job with that agency before doing that. So it was sort of a gift that they both gave me. The company too said, take this summer, take this one time, and then come in and join us in September. So that all I did. I mean, I worked for it. I was obviously proving my way, I guess, along the way with them, but it was very lucky that I had that experience.
Wow, that is a major gift, isn't it? So, whilst you maybe didn't get all your holidays growing up, you
Yeah.
certainly made up for it in those few months. Yeah, wow, an amazing sort of time of your life, I guess. And so when you went back to your job then, so obviously, you've got this through complete merit. It might have been luck at the start to get into the industry, but actually, by the sounds of it, you made it your business to just be a nice person, to get to know people, to build those relationships. And obviously, that's then, I guess a step forward in your career. So talk me through when you went back then. So how did everything start evolving from there?
In terms of actually kicking off my career.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it was hard. I'll be honest. I think it was, we all are now hearing the stories. We even have, shows like Mad Men that were taking place even before that time, but a lot of that was acculturated, continued in the industry. So I think it was more of a reality check. I think when I was, going there on summer breaks and during holidays, I got like slices of it, and I could pick up things that just didn't totally seem right. But it was different because, I was just absorbing all of the greatness, and I was navigating to the things that I really wanted to be a part of, and I could kind of shut the other out. But when you're there full time, it's different. And so I think I was more face to face with the fact that, wait a minute, everybody in top senior positions are men. And, in this important meeting, it looks like there is either no women being invited or one person, and that person isn't actually speaking, but they're very vocal and they have lots of points of view. So you start to connect the dots and start to see the things that don't seem quite right. And then the other thing was, when I was still an intern, I did get lots of opportunities to prove myself handed to me. And in college, we were really taught to kind of go in and seize the moment. When I was there, maybe I don't know if it had anything to do with me versus some of my peers, but I, it was much more of like, you pay your dues now. You do the grunt work. You work very long hours. You go get the catering for this meeting, and you sit in the meeting if you're lucky enough to get invited in and take the notes. And so I'm not to say that I wasn't prepared for all those things. I was ready to work really hard, and earn the opportunities, but I definitely got exposed to a very different side of things. And then I think I've actually told you before, I had one crazy story where one of my early clients was WR Grace. And so they were acting as if they were like giving me something as almost like a promotion, like they were putting me on this business where I was literally going to be a one woman show. And I didn't understand why all these senior people were running from this account, but they were going to give it to me because they had confidence in my ability to take on this business. And I was going to be a community relations manager who was really navigating the corporation and the communities that they were dealing with in Massachusetts. And some of you may be familiar with the film Aaron Brockovich. And I won't go into this long story other than to say I literally was living that, where the company had unfortunately put contamination into the waters that these people were living in. And they were suffering the illnesses, or their children were, in those communities. So it was a eye-opening and awakening experience, to say the least, that, to really also recognize that in our careers, sometimes we can't pick and choose the businesses that we work on, but how they align to our own values and the choices. And that sometimes you could be getting a paycheck and working really hard and thinking that you have some level of status, but in actuality, the work that you are doing and who you're doing it for matters a lot. So it was another interesting wake up call for me, for sure, in my career.
I mean, it is one of those OMG moments, you're like, you think you're being promoted, or you have this, extra experience up your sleeve, and actually what you were dealing with was crisis management. I mean, goodness. Like, how did you manage to get away from that? Did you have to just suck it up and work on that count, or did you manage to sort of palm it off?
Oh, I was working on it because there was a bit of naivete for the time. Like, I mean, I
Yeah.
immediately knew the kind of meetings I was in and what was going on there. But I also, well, one thing, and one quote that I've always used, and now that you have a little bit of my history, you'll understand too. My family's kind of put it on me, and I've used it myself. But it's, um, I turn lemons into lemon meringue. The reason lemon meringue versus just lemonade is that used to be my mom's specialty. And when she was in her good mood and good happy place, or we ever had guests over, the lemon meringue pie would come out. So I so I immediately, I think, said, okay, well, wait a minute, this is still an incredible, they have put trust in me, and this is an incredible learning experience. I might be on the wrong side of this issue right now, but there's a job to be done here. And so how do I learn from it and rise to the occasion to earn what might come next from the people that are evaluating me around me? So I didn't ask to get off, but I did ask for more information, and I did ask for more support, which eventually did come. But it was through that I continued to find other accounts that felt like probably a better place for me to ultimately be. It took some time. And I don't think in terms of the naive comment that I made, I don't think I really fully understood the full situation until, like, even sitting in the movie theater and watching Aaron Brockovich and saying, "Wow,
Wow.
that was my client, and I lived through that." So,
That is insane. I mean, the thing is, whilst, morally it didn't sit right, I guess it gave you so much more experience than you could ever get. Because if it's all just plain sailing, then fantastic. But you have to, I think, in life and in business, and have this adversity, whether it be a difficult client, whether it be a difficult situation. But I don't know what you think. For me, it just molds you as a person for your life.
100%. Like, my whole career, it has been a thematic, for sure, is this notion of, oftentimes what is given to you and what is right in front of you is not what you were expecting or necessarily what you would have wanted. But the ability to still see in that potential, and a way into progress and evolving yourself through it, and the circumstance through it, is sort of how I've tried to, gravitate and embrace these moments. And I've said this to colleagues before too. Like, I think I'm the classic professional that is completely underestimated and always sort of underestimated. But whenever I kind of get into that moment where I just feel like I'm once again sort of being underestimated, and it's important to ask yourself why and to look into that too. Like, What might I not be showing up, or how I might not be speaking up for myself or carrying myself with certain gravitas or presence that's really important for this moment. But at the same time, I've always said to myself too, would you rather be underestimated or overestimated? And so I've really come to the place of I'd rather be an underdog. I hurrah for the underdogs. I'm rooting for you too. And I think it's a more sometimes powerful place to be and humbling. And we should always be learning and always strengthening ourselves.
Do you know, I actually think that's a really key point about being the underdog because I think especially when you come from maybe harder knocks and it's working class families and you've had to really fight for everything that you get because you don't have the silver spoon that just gives you it. Think, I don't know about you, I just think that's very inherent in working class people. I still feel like the underdog today.
Yeah.
So, I travel the world, work with good people like you. I get to see so many sights and I always come back to my humble town. I still live where I was brought up because I've never wanted to leave my roots deliberately. And so for me, I always feel like the underdog because you never rest on your laurels. You don't know if it could ever be taken away because things can go away at, the click of a finger. And so do you think that plays in your mind as well? Like it's, maybe, I don't know if it's maybe around what your mum, the tough love in your mum, you can always be better, you can always do more. But where do you think the mentality of the kind of underdog sentiment comes from?
I think it does come from one external feedback that, you, even if it's not in language, but that it's the non-communicative communication, the body language, the signals that you get sometimes in situations, to the fact that, things don't always come up for you the way you would want them to, but still end up working out really well despite that. And that back to the notion of like self-reliance and counting on yourself. Like that is the foremost, most important piece, is that relationship that you have with yourself and that trust you have and the confidence that you have that you will see your way through it, and get yourself to, higher ground or a better place. So I think it's where it comes from, and why you would rather almost have it be that dynamic than
Yeah.
than to your point, a place where everything is almost too good to be true and is getting kind of handed over to you, and you feel like you're at the pinnacle, and you kind of can forget sometimes that this is one, keep the perspective, and two, it doesn't always last the way you would want it to, forever. It's nothing's given.
I mean, you can sort of, I can get a really good sense of you as a person. I mean, obviously we know each other, through passing and through business, but I feel I've really got to know you as a person, which by the way is a compliment 'cause I think you sound like a great human, and you are. But as a leader, I'm led to believe that you talk about healthy love, and it's about a way of leading others. Can you just talk me through that and explain what you mean by that to people?
Well, I talked about in my earlier upbringing,
Yeah.
that, one, the absence of love, what it felt like, and then the presence of love, the difference that made, that sense of stability that came from that, in juxtaposition to the abandonment and the feeling of, do I matter? Am I important? Do I count? And so I think having that so present from my grandparents, was a large ingredient that allowed me to, find my potential and fight for my potential, and to keep striving in that regard. And then to do that for others, to realize throughout my career that if as you stand tall, as you let your light shine, you are doing that for others. And so come to things with a place of abundance. And so for me, I developed this notion early on. First, it was like the sense that I love being in a place of potential, of believing that there's more that can continue to come from yourself and those around you, that you have a role to play in unlocking that in the others around you. But over time, what became more important to me was, well, then what is the how to that? How do you make that happen? And it was this single belief that it happens through love. And when I thought about places that I felt safe, like even a yoga studio, where there is this sense of like open-heartedness and, you know, a respect for others, a respect for the practice. Ballet is another kind of analog to that. It's like in all these places where I looked at, even for other people around me, when good was happening in their life, it was a coach, a teacher, a mentor, in the absence sometimes of the parental piece of that. There was this existence of love, this ingredient of love in the healthiest possible way. And so I thought to myself, well, why not have that be part of the professional and work code? Why can that not be present professionally? Even if you don't put a name to it or language to it yet, just show up that way. Just treat people that way. People that you can tell feel isolated or are missing that to feel secure, to feel seen. Like, what if you brought that into the relationships as a leader and dimensionalize the workspace through this? Like, let's just experiment in a way and see what happens. And it just, for me, it created momentum. It created a overwhelming sense of safety and structure and community and bondedness to each other and commitment to the job to be done, to the mission, to the vision. And so without putting putting the business books and all the other learnings aside, I just felt more empowered to just be that kind of leader, which at the time was so disruptive and different than what you were experiencing, and oftentimes had to be obscured from the most senior people or boardrooms that I'd have to walk into, because it was like a tangible intangible. But it was creating business result. It was creating success for me and for the people around me. And so that tying that intangible to the tangible, to the business outcomes, just became something that I was like, I'm going to make this a superpower. Like, I'm really going to understand what's happening here. And I'm authentically and genuinely, I'm going to see how I can scale this for myself and for other leaders. And I have a language called leverage. So we won't go there now, but it's something that I have really given lots of deep thought to and lots of commitment to.
Well, do you know what? That's exactly why you're such a good leader. And that's, one of the reasons why you're on here today. Because I think, if more people thought the way you did, I think the world would actually be a very different place, because it's not about the iron rod anymore. It is about that leverage. So it might be a term I maybe nick myself because I really like it. And one sort of parting question is, or I might be lying because I've probably got a couple more. But the main question is, what advice would you give to people? Like, so say you've got people in that sort of quandary moment, they've maybe not got the qualifications, but they want to do something, but they maybe don't know what their niche is yet because maybe they're young or maybe they're even midlife crisis or whatever it is. What advice would you give to people to sort of keep going and striving to be the best that they can be?
Well, one thing I do say is that, work is a four-letter word. Work is work, but you got to put in the work. And I know that's not always popular sentiment in today's world, and I get it, because there is a lot that we have to balance, and everyone feels very overloaded in the weight of, even the world oftentimes at us, coming at us on our shoulders. But I think that this isn't easy. Like, things don't just sort of get handed. People who you've seen who have made it, even people who maybe you see with privilege who have made it, it still wasn't easy. And you have to give credit where credit is due in terms of the
Yeah.
work and the sacrifice and the decision and the mindset to be in the positions that people are ultimately, attain. And so I say, be ambitious, ignite and be around people that allow you to keep that ambition alive. Do not, if you have it and people are dampening it or being destructive to it, make your way into another space and another person in another place. But put the work in and keep the ambition alive and recognize that in time it does come. You showing up authentically, and I know that can be cliche and misused sometimes too, but allowing, the strengths that are in you to come forward and to shine through and not come from a place of this is only a zero-sum game and it's about competition and someone else has to fail for you to succeed. It doesn't have to be that way. If you work hard and you show up in your strengths, you will grow from there.
Well, I think they're very wise words. And I do have a final question. So that this is the truth. This is the final one. I can imagine with everything you've been through, the life that you've had, you've obviously been a survivor, you've had a vision, you've not let anyone get in your way within reason. You've really built up and you've become what you are today because of you and your family and the love and everything else. How proud are your family of you right now?
I like almost get choked up with you saying that, and I really appreciate you asking that because we all do have to have grace with our parents as well and recognize that they were young and in their lives living and figuring things out too. And both of my parents, fortunately, are both alive and still in my life. And, people that I absolutely am grateful for and adore, especially my mom, who I'm giving hopefully a really lovely last chapter of her life because I'm investing back in her. And I'm giving her hopefully a huge thank you for everything that she's made possible for me. And my dad also, I'm there for him. And it is amazing because if you can find the way to not hold the past against people, and I mean this, probably a little bit more so for my father, and but that, he's at a stage where he needs me now in a way that I could never have expected and imagined when I was a little girl. And I just feel grateful that I'm in a position where I can make both of their lives just a little bit easier and a little bit sweeter.
Well, thank you so much for that. I'm sure, without getting into it too deep, I'm sure they're extremely proud. And, I'm sure everybody listening to this and watching it will be proud too, because we just like to see good things happen to good people. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Lynn. I mean, what an incredible podcast and session you have here. I mean, I listen to all the other people that you interview, and they have incredible stories. But the fact that you're putting these stories out there, there's no greater gift. And you're just the perfect person to have birthed this and brought it to the world. So it's a pleasure to get to know you deeper through these conversations as well.
Great, thank you so much. I will catch up with you soon when I'm back in New York.
I love that.